Trigger warning, this podcast contains mature themes and discussions of cults, manipulation, and trauma. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking, where we expose the dark side of control, manipulation, and the human stories behind them. I'm Anonymous Andrew, executive producer and investigator into cult dynamics and coercive control.
And I'm Melody, a cult survivor and advocate for awareness and healing.
This is Cultimatum. Welcome back to another episode of the Cultimatum podcast, the culture of cults and human trafficking. And my name is Anonymous Andrew. And with me tonight is my co-host, Melody. Hello, Melody.
Hi, Andrew. Today we are joined by Anne-Lise, an ex-member of the Worldwide Church of God. We found Anne-Lise through TikTok, where she shares openly about deconstruction and healing after leaving high control belief systems. She's also the author of a book titled The Untherapist. She's here today to share her story and encourage healing the healing that can come through deconstruction. Anne-Lise, welcome to Cultimatum.
Thank you.
Yes,
So
welcome.
Right in.
Yeah, jump right in.
Let's dive right in.
Okay. Well, I have listened to some of your podcasts. I definitely went to the episodes Melody gave me from fellow WWCG members. And I've also listened to Melody, your story, and most recently to the two most recent posted podcasts with Dr. Ray, was it?
Oh,
yes. I'm listening to his book too. I think it's called Sex and God. So good. And realized that I didn't know I was raised in a cult until I didn't really accept it until I was already on my second marriage. So let me back up. I was born into Worldwide Church of God. It was all I ever knew. And my it's led or was led by Herbert W. Armstrong. I think he died in the late 80s. For some reason in my mind, it's 1988, but that may not be true. Whatever the case, I feel like my father took the teachings of Herbert Armstrong very seriously, and he sort of made his own version of the tenets of the religion, and he carried it on so that, whenever Mr. Armstrong, Mr. Armstrong? Whenever that leader died, it really didn't create a tangible difference in my life because I was still in middle school or something, and it just kept being just as strict. And then I married into the church. You marry a member because you gotta you gotta keep it rolling. And then I left the church because my husband left. So we were a few years into our marriage, and it's been super interesting reading this book by, who did I say is it? The one you just had on, Dr.
Daryl Ray.
Dr. Daryl Ray, that book called Sex and God, and he's all about religion's effect on sexuality. And I realized that's really my story. I married this man when I did and why I did because I didn't want to have sex before I got married, and he was pressuring me, so I had to get married. I didn't really love him, but it was what you're supposed to do, and so I was like, well, I mean, he's here and he's wanting to marry me, and I can't what was the figure? I was just reading Dr. Ray's book today, and something like 95% of people don't wait till they're married to have sex. I was like, well, I'm in the 5%, but I'm not proud of that because it was the only reason I waited was fear. So anyway, he actually turned out to be a full-blown sex addict. And I think about, this was my first husband, and I think about how different his relationship to sexuality might have been had he not been raised in that cult or in a cult, and have been programmed with all of that shame. And I believe he was born into it as well. So we had that in common. We had an understanding that I was the submissive partner and that I was to do whatever he wanted me to do. And that was the way that, you quote get to heaven. And in worldwide, you didn't go to heaven. There was a whole other belief system. But whatever the case, you wanted to be on the good side. You didn't want to burn in the lake of fire. That didn't sound fun at all. And I really took that stuff seriously. And so a couple years into our marriage, he wanted to start exploring like um swinger type stuff and all this very exploratory sexuality, and I was freaked out. So he somehow along the way figured out that he was going to have to pull us out of there, out of that religion, in order to have the sexual escapades that he wanted. And so because I was trained to believe that the man, represents God in the marriage. And so whatever he decided, even if that meant leaving the church and the belief system that I grew up in, that he was the reigning power in my life. It was my dad, and then he passed me off to my husband. And so now when he wanted to leave the church, I mean, yes, it scared me, but I had an understanding and belief that as long as I followed him, I was under his protection, even if he left the only, religion I had ever had any experience with. And so I don't I mean, this was many years ago now. This was in the mid 90s. And so I don't remember being super super worried or scared because I felt protected by his husband authority. And so that's when I left.
But
And
let me just please jump in here. 'Cause this is just fascinating stuff. The Worldwide Church of God condemned, let's just say, orgies, right, or all this kind of
right,
sexual
he sort of, yeah, they were very, yeah, the
strict
things
about it.
about as far as, like, you have to be monogamous and all, and you have to wait till marriage, all that stuff, yep.
And that wasn't his scene. So he decided that I have my wife and I can do whatever I want with her because he knows that that's the protocol, that you are submissive to him.
Yep.
So he come up with this thing about we're going to leave this church so he can go off on his sexual escapades with you and whomever else, and I can only imagine what what that entailed. Um,
Oh, it
I,
was rough.
okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
And I think the
It's
reason it
amazing.
for
It's
him
amazing.
so well, and the reason I gave so little resistance is because of how I was raised. So my father is, I would say we were raised in an asexual environment. I never even saw my parents I saw them hold hands once. My sister and I almost passed out. We were so scandalized. And we were like teenagers, and it was like, "Oh my god." And they like, I don't know, they were holding hands walking into church, and we were so scandalized. And we were the zero sexual sex education. It just wasn't talked about. It was understood and implied that you just don't deal with it, you don't think about it, you pretend it doesn't exist. But I think where I was really programmed was you listen to the male authority in the home, which
Right.
until I got married was my dad. And so that I've looked at this and dealt with this and processed this a lot over the past whatever it's been 20 almost 22 years now since I've been away from that first husband. Like, how did this happen to me and what happened? And my real personality, which is extremely independent and very, very self-possessed, has emerged. How did I let myself get there? It's because my family was a cult. Like,
Mhm.
I don't even think, based on my experience, even like looking at my siblings and looking at their friends and my friends I had from church, I don't think everyone who was in worldwide experienced a cultish religion. I think it had everything to do, and this is my broader belief about cults. Like, I think that there are certain cults that are extreme enough, like maybe Melody House of Yahweh. Like, that seems super extreme. I doubt that anyone came out of there that didn't somehow get directly affected by what was forced upon them. But I do think I think a lot of religions, it's the personal experience of the member that could be considered cultish or not. And I think that there's also some churches that people wouldn't necessarily ever classify as cults, but people grow up in them and have an experience that is a cult experience where they are controlled, where they are manipulated, where they are fear-mongered into obeying and staying and submitting, and so I really think I was groomed to be a good little cult wife and mother and participant by my family of origin, and then it just made sense once my very mentally ill first husband figured out that I was completely compliant. It made sense for him to pull me out of that structure that really wasn't where the hold was, the religion itself, and then put upon me his version. So he
So
became my religion in a
it
sense,
would be safe to
right?
say that your family growing up was a safe haven for you. There was no sexual abuse, there was no sexual deviation. You said your mom and dad barely showed intimacy, they held hands once. So you were not exposed to any type of sexual intimacy. Forget the acts of sex alone, just intimacy between two loving couples. Okay. Okay.
There
Very
was
good.
no example of that. We were like an 1800s pioneer family. There were 6 of us kids. We always lived way out in the country. We had a cow that we milked. We'd gather eggs and butcher chickens, and we had a huge garden we ate from.
Little
We were
house on the prairie.
Yes, Little House on the Prairie. That is exactly what it was. And my dad, it's so ironic. Bless him to Timbuktu and back. But he wanted me to grow up. I think he knew I'd be a writer. And he wanted me to grow up and write a Little House on the Prairie style book about our childhood. And instead, I exposed the whole dang thing. But I had to write my truth. And we didn't have there was no sexual misconduct. It was very, like, emotionally. I was emotionally illiterate, which is what led into what I ended up becoming and doing now. But we did not talk about feelings. Everything was fine. I was very much like what am I, 51 or something right now? So I'm a Gen X person, but I was raised like a generation before me because dad was so determined to give us, like we didn't have a TV. We wore dresses to school. In the middle of just regular life, I was like the generation before me. He really valued that, very homestead, DIY, and part of it was we were just poor. He's a scientist and he could have made a lot of money and he was very much, blessed are the poor. He was but he believed in his job and he stated, I don't know, that's partly just his own whatever, but he justified our poverty by saying, that God loves the poor people more, and so we were good. But, it was very I was very naive. I was very sheltered, and then, yeah, when I married this person, I look back on it and it was such a perfect storm, because this man didn't even end up being that strong of a personality, like, at all. But I didn't know that till he left me. I didn't
Oh,
know. I
wow.
literally didn't know. Now I'm
So,
like, "Why didn't I do that for a long
how
time?"
long did you guys stay in the religion after you got married before he pulled you both out?
So we got married in 1992, 3, 4, somewhere in there. I think my first son was born in 95, so we must have gotten married in 94, and I think we left maybe we'll say we got married in 93. We're gonna say 93, and then I think we left around the time my second child was born, which was, like, she was born in 97, so we were there for about 4 years. But our
Okay.
first couples that we swung with were from that church. We just ran
Oh,
out. We ran through the available it was a small congregation, and I think he got bored of them. There were only, like, 60 people in that particular congregation at the time, and so I think he just looking back, since everything was about these conquests and exploits, which I did all the work, by the way, because I'm fearless, and if I believe in something, I just go for it, and so, when he wanted couples for us to play with or whatever, like, he had me go do all his work, and then he could just, be the big king that received everything. I'm like, "Oh my god."
Wow.
Ridiculous. I mean,
So
it's
how long did the marriage last after you left? How, did that
7
last quite
years.
a few years?
We
7,
were
wow.
together 11 it was 11 years, and it only ended because he left me for another woman, is the only reason. Otherwise, I'd still be with him. I didn't know.
Wow.
I did not know. Didn't know. Didn't know I could leave. I didn't know it was safe. I did because that this is where I have maybe a little different belief about what constitutes a cult, because I've seen other people who grew up in Worldwide, some of whom still attend, like, different offshoots of whatever it ended up being after the, original leader died, um, that are fine. They're, like, well-adjusted humans. Not everybody who went through that system. I don't know percentages, I haven't done any research on it, and I haven't really even stayed connected with virtually anyone from that part of my life, because I think the mostly because the abuse inside of my marriage was so complete that I was cut off from everyone, so I kinda just lost touch. I mean, it's my family and everything, which we've put things back together, my family of origin, somewhat. Yeah, so I think that the reason Worldwide was such a cult for me is because it was such a ripe environment for my father to exert that authority and for my mom to fall into that example of a submissive wife who doesn't have an opinion and who only takes orders and leadership from her husband. So,
I find that very interesting, actually, Annalisa, because when you say that, it makes perfect sense when you say it, because really, I think, like, even a mainstream religion, whether it's Baptist or Catholic or whatever it might be, Methodist, and if the family structure runs in a cult-like way, I could see how that would be your experience, and your experience would be different from your neighbors who maybe don't take the religion as seriously, and they break the rules, and they, allow the kids to watch TV or whatever it is you might not be allowed to do. It really just depends on how seriously the parents take it and what they're emulating for their children. I think that's very observant of you to come up with that, and I'm sure that was part of your deconstruction, like you said, to figure out, "Hey, why did this happen? Why did I make these how did I end up in this situation?"
yes.
And that's how we learn, right? Is by figuring that out.
It is, and I've had multiple people read my book that know me now, and the number one question I get after they read my book is, "How in the hell did you that I know, Annalisa that I know, how did you let this happen? How did" because a lot of the book is about a little bit of it's about my childhood, but a lot of it's about this first marriage. And how did you let that happen? And how did you go along with all of it? And how did you agree with it? And how, when you secretly didn't want to do any of it and we're not having any fun. And it's so difficult, Melody. I've heard you you have all these guests on, and Andrew will ask these really thoughtful, curious questions because he hasn't been in a cult and he does not understand. And
Right,
and so I'm talking to people like Andrew who don't have personal experience, and I feel and I'm better about it now because 'cause I've gotten used to it, but when the book first came out in 2020 and people were reading it and they were just like people who knew me and they're like, "How did you what we you of all you're so strong and confident and you're so boundaried," and because I believed with my whole soul that this is the right way to live. You
right.
always defer and you always honor and you always do whatever he wants, no matter how crazy it is. And I just took that so far because he took it that far. I never thought to question it. I didn't. It did not come up. It was
That
not part
I
of my
mean,
thinking.
that makes sense to me because I understand the cult mentality and how that brainwashing works and how basically you fall into like I said, robot versions of
Yes.
yourselves and each other when you're in that cult mindset. You
Yep.
do what the group wants you to do and or what the leader wants you to do, and in your mind, your leader was your husband. So you were
Absolutely.
doing what he expected.
And
Exactly.
and thank you for validating my part in this because when when Melody and I were planning this in the beginning stages, and I had already done a kind of couple cult podcasts on my own, I had no idea what I was doing. But I also know that there's boundaries that you can't cross, and there's questions that I should be careful about asking. And I didn't want to turn guests away or ask a question that would trigger something, a response. And then I thought about the audience. What's our demographic? So there are a lot of people out there who are interested in this whole cult dynamic society that we're finding ourselves in. It's been around for hundreds of years, but it's coming to light. And I thought that maybe a non-cult survivor would ask questions. So like Melody and you were talking and talking and talking, and you're saying things and you know what you're talking about because you've been in a cult, but I don't. So I would come in and go, "Can you explain that?" And so anyway, just thank you for validating that.
Oh,
That was our
absolutely. And what's interesting is I ended up marrying somebody like you, Andrew. Like our first few years together was a lot of him going,
huh?
"But
No
why did
clue.
you do that?
Yeah,
Or how did you let that happen?"
yeah.
Or and he was so non-judgmental, just like you are. You've got this wonderful curiosity about you. I love that.
Thank you.
You're genuinely just fascinated with human behavior and how this stuff happens, and you have such a empathetic heart for people, but you're coming from the outside in terms of this experience where Melody and I are like we could just because we've
Yes.
even come
You
from
could
some of
talk for hours about this, and you could even almost like finish each other's sentences type thing. But I would be going, "Wait, I
right.
don't understand what you're talking about." And
Yeah,
Especially
like
since my cult leader actually used to study Herbert W. Armstrong and technically was an offshoot. So,
yes,
yes.
and
oh,
that was so
really?
interesting when
Yes.
yes, and I've heard you mention that in several of the podcasts, especially with the worldwide, interviewees. So, yeah, gosh, it's hard it's so hard to try to explain it, and what I've
You
learned
can't.
is that you can't,
No.
and I've learned that there is a certain mentality, and you guys have mentioned this in podcasts in some of your other episodes, that the earlier the person gets programmed, the easier it is for them to sustain that programming independently. So you got to think, I was out of worldwide. I was cut off from my parents. I had no more influence from the original programming. It was just one person. It was just my husband. But because of his role in my life, his position as the authority figure in my life that I was to honor as God, because, you know, Christ is the head of the church, whatever that one scripture I would repeat on. I can't even pull it out of my head anymore. Um, the
That's
husband is the
okay.
head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. There it is. I had to take a second. So I would repeat that, it was a mantra for me, and, whatever he wanted, and the whatever he wanted got crazier and crazier. Like, he'd have me go pick up strippers for him. It was
And
I'm
you
like,
thought this was all normal stuff.
I thought it was normal. He had me convinced. He said, every husband is secretly like this. They just don't talk about it." I'm like,
Mm.
"Well, I don't talk about it, so apparently that's true." I had no idea. So what's so kind of, I don't know, ironic. It sounds very Jerry Springer, but we were we were swinging with this one couple, and when you're in that environment, it can almost be like a cult too, by the way. But I never had any fun because I was on duty. Like, I had to make sure my husband was happy and he was getting all the attention, and there was no distraction, because if that didn't happen when I got home, I got beat up. And so I tried really hard to keep him happy and busy and whatever. Well, so we meet this couple, and this was the first time this had happened, but he really liked this wife. Like, and his secret fantasy was that a wife would like leave her husband for him, and like, I don't know what was going to happen, but we tried that once. We moved this woman in, and it was nuts. It's all in the book though. But anyway, so then he meets this woman he's really into, and her husband and I got along pretty well. I mean, I always was real distant. I never wanted my husband to get jealous, or anything. But her husband was just nice. He's just a nice guy. He just treated me well and whatever. But those two ended up running off together. My husband broke the cardinal rule, runs off with her, moves in with her, and just wanted me to wait around and tend to the 4 kids that I'd had for him and, and he would come visit and he was off with his new girlfriend now. And that was, I don't know, something snapped. Something snapped in me. And I said, "No." I said, You're more scared of her than you are of me." And it was just this moment. And then he was like, "No, and I just hung up on him. It's the first time I stood up to him at all. This is 11 years in. He's now moved in with this other woman without telling me he was going to do it. But the only reason I knew that it happened is because her husband, they were in the middle of getting a divorce. So she had just moved. He was moving her into her new house. So, her soon to be ex husband called me because we used to be the ones that arranged our meetings.
Escapades.
And so
Yeah.
but he wasn't supposed to call me anymore because they were getting a divorce, and, like, now we couldn't, be friends with them anymore, and I was bummed, whatever, but I was like, "Whatever." And so he's moving her into her new house, and my husband shows up with his overnight bag. So he called me, he's like, you will never guess who just showed up at her house with his overnight bag." And so that's when I called and said, "You come home or don't, come home now or don't come home." And he didn't come home, and he but anyway, so, that husband and I ended up together, and it's so good. It's so good. I love
Oh,
him so much.
really? You're still
We're
with him?
soulmates. Yeah, yeah, we're at
Wow.
20 years, and it is so good.
Wait. So your second husband was a result of all this shenanigans of the wow. Good for you.
They
Yes.
lasted they lasted about 2 tumultuous years, my ex and this woman, and Tom and I are almost 22 years and stronger than ever.
But
Anyone who
monogamous.
meets us and yes, anyone who meets us and sees us together, there's something really
Good for
special. And
you.
they were in a really tumultuous relationship too. Surprise, surprise. Um, but so Tom and his ex-wife were. So us finding each other, it's really what led me to dig into my past and try to understand how things
Mm.
had been so hard because all of a sudden, and I was 30 years old at this point. This was in 2002. I was so everything was so easy. All of a sudden all the things I had tried so hard to make happen were just easy because he wasn't trying to control me. In fact, he was actively okay, I didn't even know what I liked. Melody, I know there's been other people we've talked about,
Mhm.
or even from your own experience or other guests you've had, I mean, that are, you lose your whole sense of agency. So I
Yes.
remember distinctly one of the first times that we had decided to be together. We didn't get to be formally married for 2 years because they made a mess of it and drew out the divorce and the fighting over the kids, and it was ridiculous. But Tom would take me to restaurants, which was made me feel so special. I was getting treated like a princess, and I still do actually. But he took me to his favorite Mexican restaurant, and I've got the menu, and I'm sitting there, and he's like, "What do you want?" And I was waiting for him to order so I could order something that was less expensive because I am subhuman. And he was like, "No, no, we're," because he had figured out that I was resisting for some reason, and he was wanting me to, you know, he was wanting me to feel special, and he wanted me to have whatever I wanted. And I didn't know what I liked. And he said, "Well, I'm just gonna pick the most expensive thing on the menu unless you pick something else." So I ended up picking whatever it was, but it was just such a good example of how I had lost all connection with myself. And
Oh.
actually, in reality, I never had. I think it was stolen away from me from my
I
earliest.
can so,
Mm.
so relate to that, Annalisa. When I went through my divorce from my cult husband, um, I remember the first time after he left, and I was sitting there with the TV remote in my hand, and I'm thinking, I don't even know what I like to watch on TV. We
Yep,
watch what he likes to watch. I don't know
yep,
what I like to watch. I had no
yep.
idea what channel I wanted to watch. I was like, and it was so overwhelming. Just that small decision, like you said, looking at a menu, I'm like, I have no idea what I want to watch on TV. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy the way that your mind actually becomes programmed to just bend to the will of somebody else.
And that's where I think that's what a cult does to you, and that's why I think people in any religion, even a non-religion, you could end up with that same mentality that might be considered cultish. And Melody, I was just listening to we were talking about the 17 years it took to decide to put up a Christmas tree, like,
Yes. Yes.
every little do I like Christmas or do I like the trappings of just the cultural aspects of Christmas? And and just all these little decisions, and so early on in my marriage to Tom, I was really like my nervous system was blown out. I was so dysregulated from 30 years of this, way of thinking that was like follow the man that's in charge and work really hard to keep him happy and then you'll be okay. And so it had gotten so progressively worse in that 11 years with the first husband. I was just in a really bad way. In fact, the first like year that Tom and I were together, we both experienced just a whole bunch of different like illnesses and stuff. It was just our nervous systems sort of
Detoxing.
detoxing from
Yeah.
the so many years of intense emotional trauma.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Don't go anywhere. More Cultimatum is coming up.
So I started on this quest to understand, to become emotionally literate, to understand my emotions, to learn how to process them. And in the process of that, together, he and I developed a whole personality model. And then I began to take it to a whole other level where I created an inner child healing modality that ultimately taught me how to tune back into my own gut, to my own intuition. Because
Mm.
of all the things, of all the bad things that happened to me, and of all the things that were stolen from me as a child or as a, a wife, or my entire 20s was completely obliterated. But really, my whole first 30 years, the most egregious sin against me was that I was actively taught to disregard and distrust my inner voice.
Mm.
That is the one thing. So if a system, and I don't care what kind of system it is, because education can be a cult, medical, the medical is your
Yeah.
career could, I mean, anything that actively teaches you to distrust your own gut, your own intuition, that to me is the real enemy. Because if you can know and trust that little voice in your insides that says something's not right here, then you're okay. Then no one can control you.
Yeah.
And then you have agency and you can make your own choices. And that's why once I got to that point and I developed a system that was simple enough that it could even work on a brand new cult survivor, that it could even work on a child or on an elderly person who's never been emotionally literate in their lives, because that's what I needed. I needed something that was so easy to understand. So what I did is I divided personhood, our psyche, whatever, into three basic parts. So your head is your inner manager. And that is all I had lived from my whole life. This is the part of us that says, I have to do it this way, and that overrides the rest of the body if you don't know how to turn inward. And then the second part is your inner child. That's your heart. That's your emotions. That's your feelings. And that's the part of you, not a historical child, not my little sad me from when I was little and I wanted to be bouncy, but my dad made me sit still in church for 2 hours. When I found out there's such thing as Sunday school and you get to color and sing, I was like, "You stole my childhood." Because we literally, even as little kids, we had to sit in church for 2 hours quietly. No, we had with our Bible, like, that was it. And you would get such a spanking if you made a sound or made the family look bad. Are you kidding me? Anyway, where was I? Oh, and then the third inner character. So the inner child is not the historical, who you were. It's the part of you that wants to smell the roses. It's the part of you that weeps at, a sad movie. It's a part of us that's feeling things. And I'd spent my first 30 years denying that I had feelings at all. It was all about other people's feelings and it was all about prioritizing the rules, which are all inner manager realm. And so then the third part, which is the part I discovered as I was digging deeper and trying to heal my inner child so I could enjoy this beautiful marriage I now had and this wonderful dynamic between the man who signed up to be the actual father of my children because they'd never had one. They'd just had an adult child who was worse than, more work than all of them. So now I've got this beautiful family all of a sudden, and I couldn't enjoy it. My nervous system was so like, where are the rules? My manager was like, what do I do? How am I supposed to, I don't know what I'm supposed to like. I don't know how I'm supposed to act. What do you need? How may I please you? And so tuning back into that inner child, in the process, I discovered what I call the inner guide. So that's like in the gut, that's your intuition. There's a wonderful book. I cannot think of the guy's name, but I believe the name of the book is The Gift of Fear or something like that. And this man like consults with heads of state and presidents and dignitaries across the world and famous people, and he talks about how like he does security, like he teaches people how to protect themselves and avoid stalkers and not get raped in a tunnel or whatever. Like, but his whole
Yeah.
point is your intuition will never lead you astray. Like, I couldn't believe with all of his science and all of his gadgets and stuff, he was like, you know
Mm.
when something's dangerous. You know when a person's trustworthy. And he said, but we stay so heightened and our nervous system stays so dysregulated and we're always so like worried. And he was specifically talking to women, but it can happen to men too, that we can't hear it. And and I just read this a few years ago, but it was so validating because all this work I've done to develop a relationship with my inner guide, I trust my inner guide's voice when I hear. So if I'm talking to someone that's of a Christian belief system, I'll say, "This is the Holy Spirit." Because a lot of times when I'm talking on therapy to someone who's of like a fundamentalist Christian
Right.
perspective, which I consider myself a Christian mystic. If I'm going to talk to Christians, then I say, yes, I'm a Christian also. I used to not say that, but I do say but I'm a Christian mystic. In other words, I experience God not through the written word or through a list of rules that come down from the religious centers. I experience God through my own inner voice, my voice. But it's not my manager's voice. It's not the rules I was taught as a child. It's not new rules I make. It's my own inner voice. And it has to come from me, through me, from my guts, from that intuition. So that's how I have reconciled and deconstructed because I had to find the missing piece. And that missing piece was my connection to my intuition. And now that I have that, now my inner child can just run through the fields freely and my manager can spend their time focusing on how to listen to the guide and honor the inner child's desires because our desires are what fuel our lives. And that's the thing I didn't have. I didn't let
Right.
myself have desires. My first 30 years of life, I didn't let myself have anything. I wasn't allowed to want.
Annalise, that
Yes.
so fascinating because I'm listening to this story and it's very unlike many of our stories. Yours took a completely different left turn with this whole sex thing. Um, I'm still just trying to wrap my head around that. Your book. Let's talk about your book. We have a few minutes left. Tell us about how and what part did that play in your deconstruction and in your healing?
Well, I will say first, it was interesting when I got invited on this podcast when Melody reached out to me because I was like, I don't think I ever even mentioned in the book the name worldwide or the fact that, that I don't think I say I was raised in a cult. I don't even think I say that. It's not part
Mm.
of what I write about. In the purpose of the book, and I wrote it in 2020 when COVID was hitting, and I had been teaching these concepts locally to like, I taught at, I did some corporate like training stuff with the personality side of things. And then I did some, stuff with university locally, and then I started just going to doing, like, group workshops, marriage workshops, things like that, and then COVID hit, and I had to take it online, and I thought, "I need to legitimize on therapy because" and it's not anti-therapy. I have nothing against a good therapist. I wanted to create something that worked whether or not you were going once or twice a week to, a really good person that's sitting down and helping you sort through things. I wanted something that would help you at 3 a.m. when you wake up with a panic attack and you need to figure out how to get back into your body. So, untherapy is kind of like unschooling, which is what we ended up doing with our kids. It's not against education, it's education that comes from inside of you, that's guided by what you need in the moment. So I wanted to write a book that legitimized this concept because there's something magical about when you put it in writing and then you say you're an Amazon bestselling author, then people are like, "Oh, untherapy's a thing." So I literally did that to tell my story of how I started out, with no emotional literacy or understanding, and I practiced that for 11 years in this first marriage, and then I ended up released from that marriage, which he divorced me, and if he hadn't, I don't know how I would have reconciled. It worked out so well because I was like, "Okay, God's releasing me because the husband released me, and now I can move on to this new relationship." It just all came together, and then through the freedom in my now marriage with Tom, I was able to start sorting through everything, figuring it all out, and building a whole system. I built a system for me. I just needed help, and I couldn't
Mm.
find exactly what I needed anywhere else.
I think it's awesome. I think this if I had had this book when I was going through my deconstruction, it would have been a lifesaver because there were no therapists out back in 1994 when I was going through this. And I think we're about the same age because I was born in 74. I got married in 92. I left my cult in 94. And I'm thinking, when you're talking, I'm like, I think we're about the same age. I think we
I
were
was
going
born in
through this stuff
74,
in
left
similar
the cult
time period.
born in 74, left the cult in 90 in or got married in 93 and left in, 97, 6 or 7. So very, very similar
Very
timelines.
similar.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, except my marriage only lasted, like, 3 years with my cult marriage.
Right.
Ironically, you have some of the similar endings because Melody left her cult because the leader wanted polygamy,
Yeah.
wanted more or polyamory or methical non-monogamy, and she couldn't. She and her husband both agreed there was something. So even the way you left each of your cults had something to do with sex,
It
Yes.
was
right,
Yes.
Melody?
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
Yeah. So
and
uh,
that leader thought or had everyone else convinced that he was allowed, right? He was allowed to
Yeah,
have the many wives and
mhm.
everybody had to do this, but it's that whole thing where why would people say yes to that? That's craziness.
Ludicrous.
yeah,
Yeah. No.
Because whoever's following is living in their inner manager. They're living from the neck up. They are not tuning in. So the ones who tuned in to their gut, like Melody, were like, "This isn't right. I'm out. I'm taking my
yeah,
baby and going. You can
yeah.
husband, you can come or not."
Now
Like,
I did go through a year where I went back and forth, "Oh, I have to accept this, but can I? I don't know, I'm pretty jealous, I don't know if I can share my husband." So I went back and forth. There was that year of from when they first brought it out. They brought it out in '93, the summer of '93, and I didn't leave till the summer of '94. But I was PMO during that time. I was physically in, but I was mentally in the process of
mm,
And
leaving.
at least Lisa, you left. Your husband took you out because of the sex, but you were probably still the fact that you said that you went along with this was because it was
Right.
indoctrinated in you. So, as we begin to get to the end, each of us, Melody and I, each ask a question of you. But I want to give you a minute. You have about 2 or 3 minutes to finish any thoughts that you haven't finished, or anything about the book, or anything you want to get out, and then we're going to ask you our final questions.
great. As far as the book goes, I am super proud that I wrote it. I really wrote it for me to really finish processing what I had created, and I've continued to evolve the system since then, and I've continued to teach it. And it was yeah, it was like Melody was kinda saying about, it playing a part in my deconstruction. It was kind of the final step. I'm not ever gonna be done, but it was the final step of putting the bow on what I understand and believe about how I was raised and where the pieces really went left made the left turn for me, and so that's what the book ended up being, but it also has helped a lot of people, not even just cult survivors, because again, I didn't make it about that so much. It's more
Right.
about how do you find yourself again when you've lost yourself, which can be from a lot of different ways.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
looking back, and you said you didn't think you were in a cult as you were writing the book, or didn't use the word. Do you think you have another book in you? And leaving an untherapist alone, do you think you have a book in you about your experience and now knowing it was a cult?
So I accepted that it was a cult. Actually, it wasn't just with writing the book. It was when I married my second husband because he was an Andrew. He was an outside person who was able to sort of lay the facts out to me. That's when I finally realized. But I have 5 siblings and I don't think any of them would call it a cult. And some of them are still active in it. My parents certainly wouldn't call it a cult.
Of
And
course
some of
not.
my siblings are pretty well adjusted. Like, so is it? Is it not? Like a lot of the practices, the way I experienced it was so I don't think for me, again, the cult experience is so much broader and it's so much less connected to worldwide as an entity. And it's so much more about why that the brainwashing and the grooming worked so well on me.
Right.
The mentality of a victim of a cult. That worked so well on me until it didn't.
And
Yes.
Melody can correct me if I'm wrong. We have come across guests and people who have yet called their ex-religion a cult, or they didn't have the experience that some others have had. And so I don't know how to say that. I think what I'm saying is it's okay if you don't think it was a cult, or if you don't think
No,
your
she
experience
did.
it
She
wasn't
did think it was. I think
okay.
I
I
You're
think
do.
she did
I
say that.
think Worldwide was a cult, absolutely.
okay.
But and I mentioned that this will be my last story, and then you can ask your question. I mentioned this in the book as well. Part of our story is that Tom and I ended up moving back to the hometown where he grew up. He couldn't wait for me to meet these pastors of this like non-denominational, charismatic sort of
Normal
Pentecostal
church.
church, yeah, where these wonderful pastors had really been such a supportive, foundational, grounding part of his life, and long story short, we got super involved in the ministry, and we were pastors there and stuff. He ended up getting violently kicked out because they were practicing they were like a little cult in and of themselves, and they got
Uh,
jealous of him, and then they preached from the pulpit that we had the spirit of Jezebel, and they told everybody to give any gifts that we had given them that were possessed, and we were gonna die, and, like, it was bananas. So Tom got his own experience with that kind of cultish thing, and
Oh,
this is just a little family church in just the middle of the Midwest, and
they
it
come
looks
in all shapes and sizes and
yes.
denominations and
and if you
Yeah,
leave our church, you'll die of cancer because they tell this story of this one person that got cancer after they left, and it's like, and I'm listening to you guys talk about because it's not honestly, I don't think about it
right.
very often. I mean, I'll say it in passing, and I was raised in a cult. Like, it's just part of, like, I was raised with hazel eyes. Like, it's just part of my DNA. It's part of my
I
genealogy.
think what I was trying to say was that there are people that are in cults that are not experiencing some of the horrible trauma that we're hearing, and they
Right.
just to them it's just a Sunday worship, and they'll never call it a cult. They're happy. They're not being sexually abused. They're not being raped. They're not being their money isn't being sucked out of them. Blah blah blah. So anyway, I just want I didn't I was wanting clarity on that. So
Okay.
now,
Yeah.
you just said something which is gonna be a good segue to my question, because
Okay.
you didn't get a chance to finish it because I probably interrupted you, which I do a lot. You joined another denomination in this small town where, your husband moved back to, and you moved back to, and you thought this was a nice little church, and then you found out it was culty. So the question that I ask is, after all of this, after 50 something or 40 something years, and you realize that you were in that one cult and then a second cult, and where's your faith? Where's your religion today? Do you have a God? Do you have a higher power? Do you pray? Do you have a religion? Fill in the blank.
Such a good question. I love this question. So, I have learned because I love to teach the untherapy system and because I've learned it works for pretty much anyone of any belief system, I don't tend to tout or claim I definitely don't claim a religion. I categorically disagree with organized religion because it becomes a business. And at some point, they're going to be making some some money decisions and some power decisions. They do not, I mean, I'm not saying it's everyone. I'm saying the concept of it leans toward abuse of power, abuse of money, abuse of bodies, especially women's body, like the whole thing. So I do not like the concept of organized religion,
Yeah.
period. End of story.
Ditto. Thank you.
However,
Oop.
I am deeply
Oh,
spiritual.
two different things. Yeah.
So exactly. They
Yes.
are two different things. So I wouldn't say I haven't found a religion that lines up with exactly how I feel, like, but I'm not looking for one either. But I did invent my own religion. There's only one person allowed in it, and it's me. You can't join, sorry. Call it consensualism. And what it means is everybody gets a choice. We choose everything. Like I have a whole belief about even who, like, that we choose our parents, we choose the time we're going to be born, that we have these different lives. Like I have a very very robust spiritual belief system. I love to share with people, but I never push it on anybody because I know how that feels and I know how well that works. And I just I'm very spiritual, and I have such faith, but ultimately that faith is in the voice inside of me to guide me correctly. And that's it's hard to explain that to somebody who has the religious mindset there, because
Yeah.
they
Mm.
externalize the power, and that was what I did wrong for
Yeah.
30 years. I externalized it. Well, and I did it for many more years after. My poor long-suffering husband Tom was like, "I am not your God. Stop doing this." He's been so faithful to not let me turn him into an idol. But I would say, to sum up the answer you asked, Andrew, I am extremely spiritual, and I'm also not trying to convince anyone else that they should be.
Which
Perfect.
would really go against your this whole concept of our podcast. Any religion that forces their ideology on somebody else is a cult. Let's leave it there. So you're doing, I think, what you should be doing, and I would love to have a conversation with you about that some other day because
Yeah.
you said something earlier that piqued my interest, and maybe we'll briefly talk about it after that. Melody, would you like to ask your question?
I do. I want to just, for the audience sake and maybe for Annalisa's sake too. Herbert W. Armstrong died in 1986. I looked it up. And the author of The Gift of Fear is Gavin D. Becker. So if anybody's looking for that book, I just want that information out there before I ask my question. So um,
Great. Thank you. Thank
um,
you.
you're welcome. So, my question is, Annalisa, if there is somebody listening today that might be finding themselves in a similar situation, but they're starting to maybe have a little bit of awareness, or they're starting to get into that phase where they're waking up a little bit and they're trying to figure out who they are, how they should move forward. What would be your words of advice to them today?
Okay. One thing, feel a feeling, any feeling, and say this to yourself out loud, preferably in the mirror. I am allowed to feel, and then fill in
Right.
whatever you're feeling. It could freaking be, I am cold. I feel cold right now. I am allowed to feel cold. Start with whatever comes up, because what you're doing is you're awakening the presence of your inner child. And that is the realm of feelings. It's bodily function, somatic, sex, all the things you feel in your body, happy, sad, or otherwise. And I cannot tell you the thousands of times I've repeated that mantra to myself. I am allowed to feel enraged. I am allowed to feel ecstatic. I am allowed to feel horny. I am allowed to feel
Sad.
disgusted. I am allowed to feel cold or hot, or, I
Yeah.
couldn't even let myself have physical sensations that didn't line up with my husband.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah.
So just let yourself give yourself permission, because you're the only one that can. That's your
Yes.
manager saying the words to your inner child that will start to wake up the presence of your heart. And once your inner child, that heart center, starts to be able to feel again, that's when you'll be able to start accessing your inner guide again.
And that will help them maybe with their journey on critical thinking, like starting to
Yes,
critically think.
Certainly.
because critical thinking only works if the inner guide, if the intuition is
Yeah.
online.
Right.
Because I could critically think all day long. I could run circles. I was very bright, which was part of my problem. you see really smart people get taken advantage of, it's
Hmm.
because they cut off their connection to their intuition. So now their critical thinking isn't critical of the right things. I was
Correct.
critical of the wrong thing.
Excellent.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Annalisa. It's been amazing.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
amazing. What a delightful conversation, and I learned so much more different perspective, and I
Yeah.
learned that I learned a lot. Thank you. Oh my
Thank you
goodness.
so much.
You. Thank you so much.
And once again, we want to thank Annalisa so much for coming on the show and sharing her story with us. Wow, you're right, Andrew. That one took a left turn, and I will say that whole swinging thing ended up backfiring on her ex-husband, didn't it? Since she ended up marrying a guy that they were swinging with, and she ended up marrying him, and she's now been married to him for 20 some years. Wow, what I did not expect that in the
I
story.
didn't see that coming whatsoever. And as you know, as the audience knows, and you know, we've done a couple of Worldwide Church of God's
Yes.
occult stories, and yeah, that was just right from the get go. I was like, whoa! Right out of what do they call it? Right out of the gate, the horses.
Yes.
I was
Yes.
like, we have a
Yeah,
winner here.
she pulled us in right away. She certainly had a unique story, unique experience, and I think she is right. I think that obviously her experience is unique to her specific upbringing, and
Yep.
not everybody had that
And
experience in there. But
I do want to clarify. I was a little confused because maybe I just wasn't understanding, but I thought there was something in there where she was saying it wasn't a cult experience for her, but she apparently it was,
but
but
I
it's
think she was saying it wasn't for everybody. Like some of the people that she
right.
knows that were
Okay.
in it didn't feel like their experience was culty.
And she didn't bring up sexual abuse to about anybody. I also wanted to
No.
ask her about kids. Does she have any kids?
Well, she said she had 4 kids with the ex, and that
Okay, right. Okay.
the new husband basically
But I
raised them.
didn't hear anything about sex abuse among her children or any
No.
of her relatives. So she might not. That's the point I was getting at. Not every cult, from Jehovah's Witnesses all the way up to Scientology, as bad as we're exposing them,
Right.
everybody has a horrible, traumatic
No.
childhood, beating, trauma, sexual abuse. It's not everybody, and
No. And
we've learned
obviously, even though we tend to find that there are abuses that are going on in almost every one of these organizations,
correct.
not everyone is suffering from that abuse.
Right.
Not everyone is experiencing that.
And I
Everybody's
think that's where
experience is
I
different.
was a little confused, is that she was not that she was saying that. I
Yeah.
I don't know. I just lost. Hey, folks,
Mhm.
yesterday we had that big blizzard 7 weeks ago. When you hear this, so
Yes.
in the Northeast, and I just got home from that blizzard and a 12-hour
Being stuck in
commute,
the
and
snow and
so my brain wasn't like quite. It was there, but I was just
you didn't say
whatever.
12-hour commute. Did you say 12-hour?
Well, it was a 5 o'clock in the morning, get up, shovel the car, get it out, then get
Oh,
to work, shovel a spot to park, get
round
into
trip.
to work, and then when I got out of work, there was my car got stuck on the ice because there was 14 inches of ice on, and so when
Yes.
I say 12-hour, I meant like a 12-hour day of just nothing but
Okay.
ice, traveling and it's the New
Yes.
York City area. It was just horrible. And guess what? I have to do it all over again tomorrow because it's going to be 22 degrees. It's not going to melt. It's not going anywhere.
Ugh.
And the following day and the following day. And then they're calling for another storm this weekend. So
Oh
this is why I
gosh,
want to
Andrew.
go to Florida.
I can understand that.
Okay.
So,
Anyway,
once again, yes, we
yes.
wanna thank Annalisa for coming on the show and sharing her story with us and her book, and as always, thank you to all of you as well for tuning into Cultimatum. We greatly appreciate your support in our mission to expose the truth and highlight the voices of these survivors.
If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to rate and review us on Apple and Spotify. It helps more people discover the podcast, creating a greater awareness. And don't forget to follow, share, and keep tuning in to our latest episodes.
You can also follow Cultimatum on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and YouTube for extra content and updates.
And be sure to join our Facebook community, Cultimatum Podcast, where we continue the conversations and keep you posted when new episodes drop.
And if you're a cult survivor looking for additional support and connection, we invite you to join the Facebook group Cult Escape and Healing.
You can also find more information about the show, including our full legal disclaimer, on our websites at cultimatumpodcast.com or anonymousandrewpodcaststudios.com.
And if you have a story related to cults or human trafficking that you'd like to share, you can reach us at cultimatumpodcast@gmail.com.
And if you'd like to support the show, you can do that by using the link in the show notes called Buy Us a Cup of Coffee. Your support helps cover production costs and allows us to keep bringing these important stories to light.
And as always, stay safe, stay informed, and remember, you are not alone.